a stretch of extremely active severe weather is currently sweeping across the United States. Now, this has been ongoing for several days. This has been bringing strong tornadoes, massive hail that we've almost never seen before in certain states, and also extreme damaging wind gusts strong enough to flip over semi-trucks. But things are about to get even worse. On Monday, one of the most catastrophic tornado outbreaks of the entire year is going to be possible, and in this video, we're going to be breaking down that and all of the other potential threats for severe weather in the coming days. So let's go ahead and get right into it. But before we do, make sure to click that like and subscribe button down below, as it helps me out more than you could ever know, and all it takes is 2 little clicks. But let's go ahead and get right into this. Now, starting off with today's Storm Prediction Center outlook, we can see that we do have 2 slight risks of severe weather in place. These are mainly going to be for a damaging wind threat at this point. We did see a couple of tornadoes earlier today back into portions of Oklahoma, as well as back into sections of southeastern New Mexico. A couple of pretty photogenic tornadoes were recorded along the Highway 70 corridor, but at this point at night, mainly going to be watching out for some damaging winds, potentially of 60 to 70 miles an hour and some large to very large hail. However, the Storm Prediction Center has still noted that a couple of isolated tornadoes may be possible across that far southeastern New Mexico or West Texas corridor. So if you are out there this evening, make sure that you do have a tornado action plan in place. Now, as we go into tomorrow, we're going to be facing an interesting threat for severe weather across the northern plains, which is not something that we're usually talking about for this time of year, but it is definitely going to be in play. If we take a look at the tornado probabilities for tomorrow, we can see that we do have a couple of 2% risks, one of them going across sections of the central plains and one of them being back through sections of Montana and North Dakota. Now, I'm going to say this right now, I really don't think that we're going to end up seeing too great of a tornado threat for tomorrow for multiple limiting factors, including instability, moisture, and more. However, one brief land spout, I suppose, couldn't be ruled out, and maybe a fully condensed tornado or two as well. Now, the damaging wind threat is actually going to be somewhat significant for tomorrow. A 15% wind risk has been highlighted for sections of far northwestern Nebraska as well as portions of South Dakota, and the hail threat will certainly be in play as well, as large hail potentially up to lime size cannot be rolled out across most of the northern plains. Now, as we go into Monday, this is the big day that everybody's been talking about for over a week now. We have a moderate risk of severe weather, a 4 out of 5 on the Storm Prediction Center scale for sections of southwestern Wisconsin, southeastern Minnesota, and northeastern Iowa. Now, I want to remind you guys, the last time that we had a day 3 moderate risk of severe weather in place, we went with a day 2 high risk. Now, I'm not saying that that's going to end up happening this time, and it's probably not, but you have to keep in mind, these day 3 moderate risks are exceptionally rare and only happen whenever the Storm Prediction Center has high confidence a few days out on an event that we are going to have the potential for a catastrophic outbreak of violent tornadoes. So you need to be on the lookout, and we're going to explain that further here coming up. But before we do, it's important to note that we are going to have another threat for severe weather on Tuesday, mainly for the threat of some damaging winds and a couple of tornadoes, all the way from sections of northern Texas back through far northwestern portions of Vermont. The Storm Prediction Center has highlighted a day 4 slight risk of severe weather, and they've also highlighted a day 5 slight risk of severe weather now for most of the DFW Metroplex. Now, I'm going to be watching this day 5 risk, this Wednesday risk, pretty closely, as I do think that a couple of intense tornadoes could occur. Also worth keeping note here that we don't have the best radar coverage out in some of these areas, so if we do end up seeing a couple of tornadoes, there's a good chance that we may not know about them unless we have those surface reports. So again, we are going to be streaming live for this event and all these other events that we mentioned thus far, with chasers on the ground bringing us the latest information. So now we're going to be taking a look at some of the models here, and we're mainly going to be focusing on Monday whenever we do this. This is the reflectivity on the HRRR model, the highest resolution model that we can look at for this event right now. Now you can see that we are going to have some early morning convection and thunderstorms across portions of the northern plains, back through portions of the Midwest. We could be talking about some isolated damaging wind gusts. However, I think more than anything else, this is going to stabilize the atmosphere just a tad tiny bit. However, there is still going to be more than enough instability for these thunderstorms in the afternoon, evening, and nighttime hours to fire off and produce strong to violent tornadoes. By 1 p.m., the HRRR model already has a couple of supercells developing across portions of western Minnesota, and if these are discrete, this is going to be a huge problem. Now, it does eventually have those developing into a line of storms, but keep note, it still has more discrete supercells off to the south, and I can imagine once we start to see these later runs of the HRRR come in, where we're going to have data going further into the future, we're going to see even more discrete supercells out ahead of this line, as we do have that moderate risk in place across most of the upper Midwest. So again, you need to be on high alert here on Monday, guys, as I don't say this often, but it genuinely looks like this could be one of the bigger tornado outbreaks that we've seen in a long time, especially in the upper Midwest. Now, obviously, we don't want to agree and just rely on what one model says, so taking a look at the NAM 3-kilometer model, the second highest resolution model that we have access to right now, you can see that it has that same layer of early morning convection in place across most of sections of North Dakota, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. Now, it actually does have these thunderstorms becoming a little bit more potent and potentially bringing a significant damaging wind and hail risk throughout the early morning and afternoon time hours, so we will watch out for that. Now, it is worth noting that the NAM model here actually has a very significant band of snow developing on the backside of this low-pressure system. Now, the HRRR had this as well, but the NAM has it much more defined and over a much larger swath across portions of the Dakotas, so there is a legitimate chance that some of these areas that end up seeing significant severe thunderstorms and tornadoes end up seeing snow less than 12 hours later, which is just insane to me. We're going to be talking about, again, more discrete supercells being a possibility across portions of Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. Again, if things do play out like this is going to be an extraordinary tornado outbreak, the likes of which we have not seen in this area in several years, especially for the month of April. So you need to be on high alert out here. Now, taking a look at the HRRR model, we can see that we have got ourselves an incredible sounding pulled up. Now, this is a sounding that I went ahead and pulled there from southeastern Minnesota, the area where we're currently thinking is going to have the greatest chance of some violent tornadoes. And for a day 3 sounding, guys, this is something extraordinary. Again, I am just looking at this and I'm in shock from a meteorological standpoint. Taking a look at our SRH values, you can see that we've got over 500 SRH, plenty to fuel severe thunderstorms and strong tornadoes. Our 3 Cape values are at 189. For reference, typically in an event, if you want to end up seeing a severe weather outbreak with tornadoes being produced, you're going to need about 50 of that. We have 189. We are almost quadrupling what is usually the necessary maximum in terms of 3 Cape, and we've also got 3,500 joules per kilogram of Cape at the surface level, which is also incredibly high. And taking a look at our wind shear values, they're not quite as impressive, but they're still definitely going to be more than enough for us to see a couple of strong tornadoes, especially whenever you're talking about 46 knots of shear within the first 3 kilometers of the atmosphere, 66 knots of shear at the effective layer. I mean, this is a very, very heavily stacked setup from both the instability and wind shear setup. Our hodograph is just unbelievable. Again, you can see that beautiful curvature and the geometrical features here with this. And again, on a day 3 sounding, guys, I cannot stress this enough. This is not something that we almost ever see. Again, I mean, we are just quite literally maxing out some of these charts here. As you can see, the effective layer SDP is basically maxed out here. We're in between a 10 and 11. Our lapse rates are sitting anywhere from 7 to 7.5, which is going to bring us a somewhat potent hail threat. But again, I cannot stress this enough. Tornadoes, tornadoes, tornadoes. That is the main story here for Monday. And taking a sounding from the NAM model as well, this is just incredibly concerning stuff. You have to keep in mind that the NAM is a lower resolution model than what the HRRR is, so obviously it's not going to be quite as impressive, but these are still unbelievably tornadically prime statistics here. We've got ourselves 124 joules per kilogram of Cape within the first 3 kilometers of the atmosphere, over 2,000 surface-based Cape. We've got ourselves SRH values over 400. We've got an effective layer STP in between 5 and 6, an incredibly impressive hodograph there still. I mean, this is still an incredibly potent setup, even if things were to play out like this. And again, this is a low-resolution model, meaning that if we look at specific areas, they are going to be looking far more intense than what this broader view is. And again, this same sounding here was pulled from the similar area, the northeast Iowa, southeastern Minnesota region. That's typically where I'm going to be putting my target zone for this event. Originally, I was thinking a little bit further south into like central Iowa, but it's looking like we are going to have a little bit more of that moisture pull further off to the north, and obviously our wind shear is going to be a little bit more impressive further off to the north as well, so I'm going to kind of put my bullseye over the Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin tri-state region. Speaking of moisture pull, if we take a look at the HRRR model's forecast for the dew points here, we can see that we are going to have absolutely no issue with that. We've got dew points in the high 60s, even getting close to the low 70s at times across portions of Minnesota in the month of April. That is extremely uncommon, okay? This is an incredibly rare pattern to see where we're going to end up having instability values rising all the way up there into the upper Midwest, even parts of Canada, partially due to this incredible moisture pull. Again, usually those dew points getting into the 60s and low 70s. That's going to be confined to areas just along the Gulf Coast, but this is an incredibly, incredibly potent setup to the point where that is going to be happening all the way up into the upper Midwest. So for anybody that's telling you that dews are going to be an issue for this event, they're likely wrong. But that's about all I've got for you guys today. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Again, a huge thank you as well to all of our members. Again, you guys are what keeps this channel running, and I really do appreciate all of you. If you want to become a member, make sure to do so by clicking the link down in the description. You're going to get access to exclusive videos. You also get shoutouts at the end of every forecast, custom stickers to use in live chats, and more. But again, that's all I've got for you guys today, so make sure to like and subscribe if you've not already, as we will be going live for all of these major severe weather events, and I will see you all in the next one. Stay safe.